Go sit at the lunch table like I did and have lunch with everybody and talk. Go on a couple ride-alongs, feel what it's like to be in these situations. You say you're a first responder clinician, like go witness an arbitration, go see a pension hearing on a psych test or case. We're all new at this, we're all pioneers. 9 years of schooling and not one special even hour for first responders. It's about being open, it's about learning, it's asking questions. If you're going to serve this culture, you got to do the ethnography, you've got to do the work, because every lawsuit, I'm telling you, David, everyone shocked me.
Welcome to Respond Resilience. Today we're going to be speaking with Sarah Gura. She's a seasoned clinician who will shed light on the legal considerations, laws and legislation, confidentiality and best practices when working with first responders. So whether you're just starting out or looking to refine your approach as a clinician, this discussion will provide invaluable insights and enhance your practice and support those who serve and protect.
This episode is made possible by Circle Brain. If you're a first responder, it's time to take brain health seriously. Go to circlebrain.com to learn more, because the toughest battles deserve the sharpest minds.
This episode is made possible by the First Responder Center for Excellence. Discover more at firstrespondercenter.org and connect with us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube.
There's a new app built by firefighters for firefighters, and it's called Crackle. Download the app now for free as a Legacy member and get early access to exclusive content, tools, and updates as they drop. Get the free app at crackle.respondertv.com.
We invite you to like and subscribe. YouTube, Responder Resilience, Facebook, Responder TV, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and go to our website, respondertv.com, for past episodes and guest information. We'll be right back to speak with Sarah after this.
In this family, more of us die by our own hands than by the hazards of the job.
In this family, up to a quarter of 911 telecommunicators have symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
In this family, our mental health and wellness are in crisis,
while responders are quietly suffering.
In this family, many struggle with job-related stress,
burnout, moral injury,
sleep disruptions, substance abuse,
and relationship problems.
In this family, we can help the helpers.
With vital information and resources,
resilient strategies,
and success stories of overcoming the obstacles.
In this family, no one is alone.
Welcome to Responder Resilience with co-hosts retired Lieutenant David Dashinger, Dr. Stacy Raymond, and Bonnie Rumley, LCSW EMTB.
So we welcome Sarah Gura to the show. She's an MA, LCPC, LMHC, and EMDR certified, and the founder of the Self-Care Path LLC. And she's a master's level licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois and licensed mental health counselor in Florida. She specializes in treating first responders. Sarah, welcome to Responder Resilience.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to be diving into some really kind of off the beaten path topics, at least as far as what we've covered so far in the Clinicians Guide. So really kind of looking forward to seeing what you have to shed light on, because it's super important information. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. I'm ready.
Talk a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are now in terms of specializing and working with first responders?
Well, initially, I, would see like a handful, maybe a firefighter here, a police officer there after I graduated back in 2007. But it wasn't until 2010 that I feel like my practice got taken over full time by first responders after working with Jeff Dill from Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. And we just started writing curriculum, creating programs, doing our work. And now it's 18 years later, of working full time with first responders.
First topic that we're going to look at is psych testing. So I remember when I got hired, it wasn't part of the process, but in a lot of departments it is. So talk about psych testing and how that should play a part in, I guess, starting a first responder's career and maybe later on down the line. How does that come into play if responders need to go for a psych test or evaluation?
Well, like you said, it wasn't always around, and it isn't for every department to this day. Sometimes we have pre-employment testing we might have an issue and it be used as discipline or feels like punishment, or to actually see, are you fit for duty? Mm-hmm. And in the long history, we've had independent medical examiners that would be hired to do that psych testing, but we have seen that it isn't normed on first responders. So one of the first things I always look for when I'm getting that report and the list of recommendations for counseling is this psych testing normed on first responders? Mm-hmm. And you have to find a psychologist, a doctoral level psychologist that will do that.
Just to go into a little deeper, why are first responders different in this testing process than, say, your average civilian?
Well, when we see a culture, right, there's diversity within every culture, and first responders are their own diversity, their own culture. And so, when you see on average more human illness, human death, human suffering, human stupidity, property destruction, you're exposed to more trauma than the average bear. Mm-hmm. So you could look worse when you are taking a psych test that's normed on the general population. And so a psychologist needs to take a look at what is the appropriate measure here so that I can accurately report if this person is fit or not fit for duty.
And having said that, what have you seen? What are some of the sort of poor outcomes or downsides when someone is, incorrectly assessed or tested as a first responder?
Well, maybe not being allowed to return to work, maybe not awarded a psych pension, maybe not getting the proper care that they need. So there's a ton of consequences when you're looking at somebody who's here to serve, protect, rescue, help, and then you say you're not fit for duty when actually compared to their peers, they're just fine.
What do clinicians need to know about working with people from the various departments and attorneys associated with them, administrative staff? How do you recommend they work with them in terms of receiving advice or what could be perceived as clinical suggestions, but how would you counsel someone to work under those parameters?
Well, there's so many different situations, right? So an independent medical examiner or psych test is going to say something about this patient and understanding why are they coming to you? Are they here just for some behavior, suggestions and coping skills? Are we doing post-traumatic growth? Are they in the middle of a workman's comp case? Are they trying, for that pension? There's so many things to consider, but one of the first things I encountered, like way back before 2010, was an attorney, for example, sent me a letter that the administration felt 40 therapy sessions was, going to be helpful to this person. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I would love, to take 40 hours worth of money. But that's exactly what that would be, is I didn't assess this patient. I didn't design a treatment plan. I didn't assess to see how long it might take. And so I had to, call that attorney and say, you have no place, the administration has no place in mandating 40 therapy sessions. I'm not participating in mandated therapy. I don't participate in mandated therapy sessions because I need to assess the patient first. So that would be the first thing I tell a counselor, is it could feel intimidating to be told what to do with your patient. But if you haven't so much as assessed them, you don't do any of that.
Got it. And I'm going to ask this because I've actually recently got a call like this. I would say that the situation was the department, administration, and even HR had an employee, firefighter employee who they really felt needed to be assessed and maybe, seen by a mental health professional. Can you speak to situations where it's kind of like they don't really know what to do with someone, so they just push it out to a mental health clinician?
Yeah, so I always say if they will sign an informed consent and they want the help, then I'm happy to assess the situation, create a treatment plan, and deal with that. But oftentimes, it's a whole system. There's politics and BS in every department, no matter how good you try to be. Mm-hmm. And, when the department is saying we're mandating, we want to take a look at this person, this is their livelihood, their bread and butter. No one wants to psych pension out. There was huge rumors like that when I first started They're like, now just all these people are going to try to, say their feelings are hurt and try to leave. And that's so not the case in this population. So I think it's really important to take a look at the entire culture of that department. I mean, we break, like different places in a state run differently, different counties. If it's a protection district with a board versus a city with a mayor that's tired of giving that department money. I mean, unfortunately, legally, we have to take a look at all those structures and see, where's my patient in the middle of all of this?
Stand by for an important announcement about our book launch coming September 2025.
All units, stand by for a confirmed structure fire with report of persons trapped.
EMDR in progress.
In a world where first responders save lives, this book could help save theirs by preparing you to answer when they call for help. Based on over 200 conversations and the trusted team behind the Responder Resilience podcast, Helping the Helpers gives you the tools to understand their world, speak their language, and earn their trust. This work is challenging, but deeply needed and profoundly rewarding. Their stories don't start with trauma, but too often they end there. Infused with real-life experiences, this guide reveals the human behind the badge and equips you to build a first responder-centered practice that works. From understanding their culture to the practical realities of working with first responders and chapters across the spectrum of first responder professions, you'll gain insight into the hidden struggles that shape their reality and the steps you can take to help them heal. When trust is shattered, the stakes are high. This book helps you build it before it's too late. Are you ready to make a difference? Be the resource they can count on. Get early access, including a free sample chapter and book launch invite. Go to helpingthehelpers.me to get your early access when you sign up. Helping the Helpers book launches in September 2025.
Let's talk about release of information to keep the clinician and the patient safe. What advice do you have on that?
So much. So a couple things. In the beginning, some departments will have the employees sign a massive release of information, saying any physician, any counselor, any service that you've received, we get that information. And an attorney will bring that up to them, and that patient will feel like, oh my gosh, I signed this in orientation, But that's not a release that's legal for me. And so they have to sign your release of information as a clinician. And not only do they have to sign it, but they have to say, to whom am I releasing it? And that party cannot release it a third time because it's considered private healthcare information. And that would happen a lot when I was younger in the field. And I wouldn't know to say to the patient, like, look, this file can't go to your attorney and the other attorney and to the department and to whomever. That's not how this works. Furthermore, you have to specify that they know that their rights and that they don't have to sign it, that they can talk to an attorney first, especially when it has to do with their bread and butter and their private healthcare information. So there's definitely, like, maybe one more thing I would say, like, our releases are only good for 1 year. So there are definitely limits to releases of information, not just to who, but in time. And most of the time I will tell them, just say that this release is over at the end of the month, and then we cut it off. And if we need to sign again, we can. But don't just open yourself up to, like, hey, you get my notes, you get my assessment, you get my billing, you get everything.
Is that vary state to state, or is it national? What's the jurisdiction on that?
So every state will have a law for the mental health counselors to follow. So one time someone had said I released their information without their permission and I about died. Like, my body felt like on fire. And I had 11 releases of information signed by this person and their spouse. So having a witness was very helpful. And going in and explaining, like, not only did I not release this information, but I hand gave it. I asked that I'm releasing this information to you, and you can give it to that party, That's what protected me. It was my release. It was duly signed. It was within time limits. And that first responder was the one that handed it off, not me. And that was so important because breaking the law on that is like $50,000 fine, and then your malpractice insurance goes up. So you need to be really clear and make sure that in your state, your release covers all the bases.
So let's talk about depositions. What do clinicians need to know if they do have to prepare for a deposition or show up in court or a legal proceeding and make a deposition? What are some of the considerations they should be aware of?
Well, the first is do no harm. So how you write everything and everything that you say is really important. And I always say less is more. But also emotionally speaking for the clinician, it can feel threatening. Like you want a good outcome for your patient. We're like warm, fuzzy people. We want everything to be okay. But the opposing attorney doesn't, they're just doing their job. But I have definitely felt like they've hired some independent medical examiners to, as crappy as this sounds, they make you feel bad about your work, or they try to word things so that you're a little bit confused, or you have to like stick to, I am like an expert on my patient. I assess them. I've provided treatment. I've seen the outcomes. I also know where they're stuck. I know that therapy takes time. But to prepare for a deposition is to prepare a little bit to be bullied and to kind of question yourself. So while you're practicing with a first responder, you better know what you're doing. and you should know the law, and you should know their structure and their culture and what treatment you're providing and why.
And at the same time, are you able to advocate for the first responder who you're representing or who they're speaking about?
I don't know if I would call it advocating, because you just stick to the facts. What is the truth, in these situations? But do no harm is a part of our ethics. And so it's really important to talk with your patient before going in and understanding where are we at. This is the information. This is what my notes say, and make sure that you're both on the same page.
Great. Thank you. So there's a lot of laws coming into play on state level, national level pertaining to first responders. There's peer support law. There's some best practice, and of course want to keep our chiefs and administrators and officers educated about how the laws work and affect their employees. So can you speak to the kind of ever-changing landscape of laws and legislation and how clinicians can kind of stay current with that?
So again, it depends on what state you're in. In Illinois, I have Public Act 101-0375, but in Florida, it's House Bill 421 for peer support law. And you should print it up. You should have it in your binder. You should understand it, because when things go wrong with peer support, you want to be able to understand and answer the questions that the peer supporters may have. So administration, even though they might say, hey, we have a peer support team and we really support this, they don't when the crap hits the fan. And then all of a sudden, like, we're getting, administration versus a peer supporter. I've definitely seen that. And we need to understand the privacy and confidentiality laws that they've been granted in that state. If they haven't been, then we refer to best practice and then maybe hopefully establish a law in that state. But it's really important to understand that it is a different hat. Even if you are at work providing peer support, the peer support hat is different than firefighter, paramedic, or sergeant, or deputy chief, or whatever role you're in.
Okay, great. And I know Florida has recently passed a law that pertains to peer support and confidentiality. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's House Bill 421.
Okay.
Are you a clinician working with first responders? Or perhaps a first responder eager to enhance your mental health knowledge? We have something special just for you. Introducing the Clinicians Guide to Working with First Responders series. exclusively on Responder TV. Join us as we explore vital topics that can transform your practice and boost your resilience. Dive into masterclass episodes like Clinicians Guide to Wellness Programs and Internships with Wendy Hummel, Building Trust with Law Enforcement with Dr. Medina Baumgart, Clinicians Guide to Peer Support and Officer Wellness with Captain Mike Fumiati, Mental Health Canines and Crisis Response with Brad Cole, Clinicians Guide to Inpatient Treatment Facilities with Pat Fitzgibbons, Working with Unique Fire and Law Populations with Dr. Robbie Adler-Tapia, and Clinicians Guide to Psychological Autopsies with Elizabeth Pohl, and more. Don't miss out. Tune in to elevate your practice and increase your cultural competency. Visit ResponderTV.com or find us on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
I don't know if it's legislation so much as the NFPA 1500 and 1582, right? Like an understanding that there are standards built within the career, that we have standard operating procedures and guidelines, and that those are forever changing. And we could, you and I click on there and we could see, which, I don't even know what to call it, but session or whatever, there's 1500 and 1582, whichever will tell you about independent medical examiners and procedures for workman's comp and et cetera. So.
Do you have anything you would add in terms of working within a department's SOPs, like if they happen to have a mental health SOP or peer support SOP, anything you can add to the conversation that clinicians might need to know?
They're not always like legit. They're like a hope and a standard and something that they're working toward. But we're all new at this. We're all pioneers. And so one department's going to be different than another. One might have higher hopes. One might have like zero F's to give. Yeah. So understanding if there is something written there and it goes outside of the therapy office because something is happening with discipline or some other issue, then you want to say, can I see that? And give it a read through and understand it in the context of whoever's sitting in front of you.
Let's talk about legal exposure in responder work. So when and why might you be subpoenaed as a clinician?
So many reasons, right? So again, workman's comp, a pension hearing, a psychiatric issue, an arrest, outside or within work, a behavioral issue, a disciplinary issue, anything that has to do with that first responders' behavior can sort of warrant a discussion in administration, maybe a consultation with the city administration or even the board. So it depends on what setting you're in, but all of those things can pull in multiple professional roles.
Okay. Does officer-involved shooting ever come into play as well for that kind of, for being subpoenaed?
It definitely can. I feel like that's less, those are a little more cut and dry. And I think like when they're doing their job and they followed the standard operating guideline and procedure, like then we're just kind of doing after action reviews. But if they're coming into counseling and there is a psychiatric issue identified, then that changes the game a little bit.
Okay. Let's talk about confidentiality and privilege and what you're legally obligated to disclose. What do people need to know about that?
You don't have to disclose much. So it's really important. I have heard of guys going into work drunk. I can't report that. Doing drugs, can't report that. Having domestic violence issues. Obviously we're all human. And when we have high stress, our behavior can be a reflection of that. But when you come into therapy, everything is private and confidential unless you're going to hurt yourself or you're going to hurt someone else or a child is involved in being hurt in some way. So people are really shocked about that I could pretty much disclose anything and you can't tell anyone. True. And same in peer support, which people don't like that quite yet either. There was also a major law in California that went across the United States. Tarasoff is the reference, but that's also duty to warn. So we do have to disclose if someone says, I'm going to kill my wife tonight. She cheated on me. Oh, that one, we got to, report. But if you're just pissed off and you're angry and you're not making any threats and I don't have the evidence to break confidentiality and warn somebody, then I'm silent and I need to listen and then help.
Let's talk about documentation. So what should clinicians know about how to document, and especially if they ever do need to kind of refer back to their notes in a legal proceeding or something along those lines?
I'm going to say less is more again. Less is more, but also like maybe an example of something I write in a daily note is WNL, within normal limits. And if they're not within normal limits, then I say not WNL, and then I might write right after that, denied HRI, denied high risk ideation, or we talked about high risk ideations, and then you would have to say, I safety assessed and safety planned. So those are mandated to fulfill insurance, but also just to keep yourself safe. Next, I'll write down something like, what is the focus? And the focus is really from my patient's point of view. Discussed recent traumatic call, discussed marriage concerns, And then the next thing that I might document is something as simple as listen, validated, provided emotional support, used CBT. And I hate to say it like this, but every counseling session is a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy. And it is not, to me, the best one that we could be using in different scenarios with first responders, but the law, the opposing attorney, and everyone will ask, did you use cognitive behavioral therapy with your patient? And if you didn't, why didn't you? So CBT, is always there because it is the very basic of listening to somebody and challenging them back. After that, if I have to get specific about EMDR or like any other type of therapy, I do, but I keep the person's details private and confidential because in the first responder world, there's something called a FOIA. And, the freedom of information with this population, all of that information can get into the public. So stay mindful, write enough to understand what and remember what you did, but otherwise less is more.
Yeah. Okay. If one has to prepare to testify as a clinician, what should they expect, and how do you best protect your credibility in that scenario?
If you are going to specialize in treating first responders, get the training, go on some ride-alongs, learn from first responders themselves, so that you can say, I am a first responder clinician. If you're not and you're in the middle of something like big and legal, refer it out. Like just say, if you had some depression or marriage issues, that'd be one thing. With a workman's comp case, a pension case, something where you're being fit for dutied, like go to someone that has some experience, in my opinion. And if you want that experience, go interview a pension board, go talk to the union members, go sit at the, lunch table like I did and have lunch with everybody and talk, go on a couple ride-alongs, feel what it's like to be in these situations, so that you can say, one, I have the experience. And I know I'm kind of going on, but then the next thing would be is to continue to educate yourself. Whenever you don't know something, you find out. You don't say, oh, that's just, something my client's saying. No, go find out what that means.
You're talking about like the lexicon of first responder work and culture and that sort of thing?
Not only that, but like how that HR department uses FMLA or like what they're doing, as far as preparing on the other side and what they've communicated to your patient. Sometimes I think clinicians want to back out and say, well, that's not my role, but there's a context there. And if you're going to end up in a deposition, you'll be really shocked how fast, like another IME or someone, a different attorney turns on you and you were like, I was just trying to be helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
And how would you advise a clinician to prepare mentally, emotionally for the deposition or court appearance in terms of, demeanor, kind of getting into the right mindset? And if they're getting a hard line of questions into their work, into their integrity, how do you suggest they kind of prepare for it mentally? And then if they're in the thick of it, what would you recommend?
One, the truth sets us free, right? So one, always speak the truth. Secondly, when they're coming at you or it feels like that, I use the same advice that I tell my clients, right? I find my breath. I pull my shoulders down and away from my ears. I might root down through my hip bones. I might spread my toes and feel my feet, because it can take you out of your body, and you need your body for mental clarity. And the other thing I've always kept in mind is that when my patients are in a lawsuit, it's almost like holding a gun to their head. That's my metaphor for it. And there isn't any amount of counseling or medication that's going to make them feel better until that gun is down. So I know that my patient is got extra symptoms that have to do with the lawsuit and not necessarily what we were working on. And I need to verbalize that and say, when you threaten someone's money, their insurance, their retirement, their livelihood, their identity, like, yes, it is more difficult to treat that patient for just the one call that you said might have upset them. So you have to go in mentally understanding that there are additional symptoms that need explanation, and to have that empathy and compassion in your answers, I believe. And you have to prepare your body for that and to feel stabilized and grounded.
What else do clinicians need to know about working with clients if testimony becomes a factor?
So there's many different places you might end up. Like, we have arbitrations, right? And that, space doesn't feel as political or legal. Going into court might feel a little different. Witnessing a pension board where everyone is moody and against psych pensions is intimidating. I don't care how tough I think I am. I don't like it. And I'm shocked. I'm shocked that they'll eat their own. So depending on what environment you're in, again, it stands, I think, to justify why it's important before you say you're a first responder clinician. Go witness an arbitration, go see a pension hearing on a psych test or case. Familiarize yourself with the different roles.
Can you get a little deeper into things you've encountered that you have to be aware of in terms of how you respond to different questions in order to not get taken down a path that you prefer not to? It's not going to look good for you.
Well, sometimes we have to get in the weeds. I find myself in those situations being an educator. At that point, I'm just teaching, and that some of my testimony is not about the patient, but about psychology and about first responder mental health and about what I'm used to seeing unfold over the last 18 years of doing this, So I think it's okay to get into those weeds. But when it comes to your patient, the facts, the truth, the clinical part, can be said very, I think, short and sweet. And so that would be what I would say you can practice, but also know you might be the educator in the room.
Well, I suppose there's times when the clinician has to go and get their own legal advice or representation. What do clinicians need to know? When might they need to seek outside advice and counsel? What's your wisdom that you'd like to share on that? Whatever you don't know, ask. And there are attorneys that specialize in mental health law. So you should have that person on your speed dial. I know in Illinois, there's a guy that specializes in mental health law, and he has a program where you can pay, $200 or something like that a year, and you get to call and ask him a question anytime. The one time I used him was because I felt my patients were signing releases of information under duress.
So when the chief says, sign this or you're fired, well, now their whole file's leaving. And I'm like, but you're signing under duress. You're so scared that if you don't comply with an order that, you're going to lose your job. But there still is private healthcare information law. So when I called this guy and I wanted to protect my patient, I was like, he signed it, but it was under duress. He said to me, Sarah, he's an adult. He's got a mind. He signed his name with informed consent. You have to release that file. And I was sort of mortified. And this attorney was coaching me. He was like providing the counsel back. He's like, if they sign, unless they withdraw that release, they are responsible for their signature. And now you need to release that information. So what I would say to my patients after that is, if you feel like you're signing under duress, you need an attorney, not to sign this just to get it done. And so the clinician cannot do anything. Once that release is signed, you are obligated to release that in a timely fashion. So that's some weight there that I think therapists and the first responder patients need to understand.
Okay, excellent advice.
This episode is made possible by Circle Brain. If you're a first responder, it's time to take brain health seriously. Go to circlebrain.com to learn more, because the toughest battles deserve the sharpest minds.
This episode is made possible by the First Responder Center for Excellence. Discover more at firstrespondercenter.org and connect with us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube.
There's a new app built by firefighters for firefighters, and it's called Crackle. Download the app now for free as a Legacy member and get early access to exclusive content, tools, and updates as they drop. Get the free app at crackle.respondertv.com.
I think, my own dislike of the justice system, plays in. So it depends on what your experience is. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of money. Sometimes I'm like, there's just so much evidence collected that we've lost sight that this is a human being who felt sad that the pit bull ate the baby and they couldn't save the baby that was torn apart. Like, hello, are we human in here? And do we care that this person isn't doing well, is drinking too much, gotten a divorce, kids don't want to talk to him, and you're going to take his identity away? So I think for me, when I hear that antagonistic approach from the opposing counsel, I ground myself in knowing I'm going to protect, help, and see if I can save the integrity of first responder psychological support right now. So that works for me. I don't know if that would work for every clinician, but this is a little bit of my baby. I didn't want this baby, but it's been mine for a while, So I want to practice as mindfully as possible. So I think that might be my main point or idea to convey about that, is that no matter how antagonistic they get, you are paving a road to make a really great point about mental health in the first responder world.
Any other legal considerations that clinicians should be aware of that we didn't already cover?
There is. I've been surprised every single case. So I could probably go through every single case and there'd be here's a story that you can learn from. Here's a story that you can learn from. I don't have anybody's permission to share their legal stories, so I can't get into that. But I think it's something that we need to study. And I think we should collectively come together to say, here's how this worked out, or here's how this did not work out, and start talking about that privately. But mostly it's about being open. It's about learning. It's asking questions. It's, if you are going to serve this culture, you got to do the ethnography. You've got to do the work, because every lawsuit, I'm telling you, David, everyone shocked me. I'm like, what? They're doing what? So,
any other resources you can recommend to clinicians that kind of help them just get more acquainted with some of these aspects of the legal system that you've been talking about?
I've learned a lot from workmen's comp attorneys and labor union attorneys. Also, the union itself, so helpful. You talk to a union president that knows their contract in and out. you start to feel like, okay, then that's okay. And I need to tell my client that like, this is all a part of it and we're okay. You know, you become a bit of an emotional navigator of everybody. So use those resources. And like I said, ask the questions. I can name drop. There was a Chicago police officer that turned psychologist. Her name is Dr. Carrie Steiner. And she's a psychologist that does independent medical examinations and psych testing normed on first responders. She is a wealth of information about this type of stuff, and maybe working with her and getting the actual psychologist point of view, because I'm the counselor. She's going to be doing some of the other work, you know, right. And she's been really instrumental. But other than her, those IMEs are not first responder specific people.
We touched on this briefly, but I'd like to see if you have anything to add to it. What do clinicians need to know about workers' comp and FMLA cases?
I think FMLA is easier. And again, less is more. So I can write that I support that this patient be out because of a particular diagnosis. And usually everything just goes fine there. Up until when you return, right? You have to say, I agree that this person can return to work, which that client might then be faced with different independent medical examiners to evaluate that. That's normal and okay. On the other side, for workman's comp, I remember Form 45 being insulting for me because it, you know, says, hey, why are you calling your patient out? Why are you saying they can't work? And it was about all the physical requirements of being a police officer or a first responder, a firefighter. And a little body chart, you know, and they would be like, you need to circle where the injury is, Sarah. And I'm like, do you know I'm a counselor? Do you know I didn't evaluate their body? Like, I actually can't, I have to write, you know, not licensed to comment on how much weight they can lift. And they're like, well, if it's not filled out, then they're not going to get this benefit or time off. So I had to just start kind of creating my own DSM-5 form, you know, and I would circle the head on the body chart, but then reference like, you know, the CPT code or diagnosis code. So the other thing is learning to get along with the paperwork that they haven't caught up with in the reality of today. Like, this is 20 years in the making. We have peer support laws. We should have different forms. And maybe we do now. I haven't done one since I've come to Florida. But if you're not sure about the form, call somebody and ask.
So you talked about, as a clinician, you assess the patient, you diagnose the patient, you create the treatment plan, you execute the plan, and you provide any aftercare and necessary referrals. What's the question?
So that kind of goes along with taking ownership of who you are and what your role is. So in the very beginning, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or because no one else taught me how to be a first responder therapist, you know, I would be shy to say, I am the therapist. I diagnosed them with this. I created this treatment plan and I do these things. And you have to own it with those I statements, especially in the legal world. And I actually remember having another psychologist take a look at a letter I wrote. And he basically said I was like not getting to the point. And he reminded me to take ownership of what I was doing there and to stop saying my patient has bipolar. No, I diagnosed my patient with bipolar and I am treating them for this and I'm doing it in this way. And I'm confident that this will be helpful because I chose it for these reasons. So I think what I'm saying is you need to be confident. You need to know what you're doing, or at least why you're doing it, and get some results. And if you're not, refer out. Like, just know I've had to refer out. I have other clinicians that I love and trust. And I would just be like, I'm not sure. Do you want to check this out? Don't hoard clients. Don't think you're the only one that can do this work. Takes a village. We can definitely talk about some of the crazy situations. And some of them range from, like you said, gunshot wounds to, being in a mayday, or if a firefighter is burned, or if in training they rip off their own mask, and then we've got an issue and they're coming to therapy. There's so many reasons why someone might ask you for help. And there's so many reasons that some of those might get highlighted as a psych issue or a performance issue, that before you know it, you're getting phone calls and they're like, hey, it's Chief so-and-so, give me a call. No, I can't just give you a call. I can't even confirm or deny that I have that person as my patient. Or you get a subpoena in the mail, or some kind of email saying, hey, what can you tell me about this guy? So I would say all of those different types of situations, you want to at least be able to flag them at the beginning when they ask you for help, because if it sounds like something you're not familiar working with and you're going to get in some weeds with the attorneys, refer it, or at least get case consultation.
You've covered quite a bit, and a lot of it seems so important and vital, and yet probably never gets taught. When you're getting your certifications, your degree, your license, does this stuff ever get talked about, or is it like just
nothing?
Left? Wow.
David, 9 years of school, 9 years of schooling, and not one special even hour for first responders. And that's why I'll emphasize again, I did ride-alongs in every area, even at a hospital emergency department room. You go wherever your clients are and you observe and you listen and you pick up on those cultural vibes to understand what you're doing. And you learn so much. Like I said, an ethnography, I think, is an important part of doing this work.
Sarah Gura, where could people find you? Any projects you have going on? You want to talk about your podcast? Fill us in on all the good stuff.
Sure. So again, Sarah Gura at the Self-Care Path. I'm a practice in Lake Mary, Florida, but I am licensed in both Illinois and Florida. So the majority of my caseload's still in Illinois 3 years later since I've moved here. But I can see people in person and through telehealth, and my podcast is First Responder Psychological Support. It's got a YouTube page and a space on Spotify. So thanks for letting me plug that in.
Thank you so much for sharing all this. This is basically uncharted territory for us on the Clinicians Guide. And as we were talking about a few minutes ago, it must be uncharted territory for clinicians in general. So it's so important, and I appreciate your wealth of knowledge and expertise and being willing to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Important stuff to me.
Remember to like and subscribe. YouTube, Responder Resilience, Facebook, Responder TV, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and go to our website, respondertv.com, for past episodes and guest information. Till the next time, stay safe, be kind to yourself. Take care.